Welcome, everybody, to today's podcast about the Osiris Shaft. I'm your host today, Martin, aka Mr. Schneebly from Ancient Nerds, and I am joined by our friends and guests, Ancient Alternative View, Ricardo, and Haizon Kuma. So, please, guys, introduce yourself and tell us a bit about you, why you're interested in ancient history, and maybe what happened so that you're here today. We start with Phil from Ancient Alternative View. Let's go.
Hi, thanks very much indeed for having me. I'm Phil from the Ancient Alternative View. My career started with I was an air engineering mechanic in the Royal Navy, became an all arms Marine Commando. On my travels, I did an engineering degree with the Royal Navy, which turned into an historical degree. And I fell in love with Rome and Egypt and the passions of Cleopatra and Mark Antony in written history. And from there, I basically became a specialist in stonework. I pioneer a set of hallmarks worldwide and actually a stone nub language. To fast forward slightly, I created a team 10 years ago that incorporated some of the greatest ancient minds in the world, and we document and store these hallmarks. We've now written a paper on these hallmarks, a statement of significance, which is now got its place in academia.edu in the top 1% of papers worldwide at the moment. I digress. The members that you're seeing in the room here around Ancient Nerds are part of my team and they're specialists in their own field. They'll obviously introduce themselves shortly. It's been a pleasure to have worked with those. We've travelled globally and we now have a team that literally has boots on ground on these sites from month to month to month, and we're data collecting basically new images, new photos, new angles. We study block to block everything on the ancient world, and we've found that a specific set of engineers actually walk the earth through these hallmarks because physical evidence can't lie, and we go and document these hallmarks. And that's basically what we've been doing for the last 10 years and making videos on that. On the back end of that, we opened the Institute for Natural Philosophy, which enables people from all mindset, skill sets to come with their ideas. And nobody's ideas are shunned, from mainstream to alternative, from an overview of everything. Is it archaeoacoustics? Is there ancient technologies? Is there not ancient technologies? What actually was going on? We're looking for the answers and wanted a platform for people to be able to come with their ideas and speak freely. So we opened the Institute for Natural Philosophy. We've been running episodes weekly on there on X Space on a Sunday evening. We're now moving to do full YouTube lives where people can come and interact and feel free to give their ideas on, were magnetics prevalent, were telluric energies prevalent, what were the hallmarks, how were they incorporated, how does archaeoastronomy and archaeoacoustics incorporate into this global phenomenon that we're seeing, what were going on with the hominids prior 12,000 years ago, Göbekli Tepe, where we had Aurignacian, Denisovan, gravity, and we had ACH humans, we had Parakan skulls, we had different sets of people, and certainly architecture suggests that, doesn't it, globally? So this team that I've put together basically wants to define and get us answers to our ancient past, and that's exactly what I do on a day-to-day basis now. My actual career, I'm a close protection officer now. I work in intelligence analytics, and basically I work in anti-terrorism, and I look for patterns, what would go on, and could Paul, Peter and John be involved in something down the line? Well, what that involves me to do and how it relates to the ancient world is basically around that. I travel to these guys. We go and we've been traveling Portugal for the last 3 years. We did Penurse last year, and basically to network and meet people that want to bring their skill sets to the forefront and go and test archaeoastronomy to archaeoacoustics to a very high level, because that's what we've been focalizing the first part of the institute's research on. There's multiple avenues, but they'll lead to diplomas and so on and so forth. And we're looking for teachers that can help teach that, but they'll become specialists within the hallmarks first. And, likes of Ricardo and Guy that have been highly involved in this from day one with myself. We'll be teaching on that as well. So we look for people, out there that would like to bring their skill sets to the table. So in a nutshell, that's me. So thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Phil. Awesome. We're very happy to have you guys here. And we at Ancient Nerds are ourselves looking to be a door opener for people that are finding out that maybe not everything that's in the history book can be like they like the historians think it is. We have our own anomaly hunter Quetzalcoatlcat, my friend and co-founder met, and we were on some good travels together. We have been to ancient Egypt, we've been to Mexico City, Yucatan, and Peru. And maybe Matt, you're the next. Let's go.
Okay, great. Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. My video's frozen, so I'm having
We
trouble
can
sort of
hear you.
coordinating this.
Yes.
Okay. Um, yeah, my name's Matt, also Quetzalcoatlcat. Had an interest in the ancient stuff since I was a kid, really. I remember doing a project when I was in probably grade 6 on Cleopatra and drawing pyramids, and that sort of sucked me into the world of this ancient exotic people. Um, Bit of a background. I've got a science background. I have a degree in physics, but also a diploma in audio engineering, which gives me a kind of a unique perspective on the acoustic side of these ancient sites. Although I haven't really delved that much on the science of the acoustic side just yet. I'm more just interested in the anomalies and trying to explain the ancient builders, how these things were made, the stoneworks, the crazy, hard to believe technology behind the accuracy of some of these structures. The Great Pyramid, of course. Like Martin just said, we've travelled a bit together and seen, Cusco, Sacsayhuaman, Peru, ancient Egypt itself. I've been there twice. Mexico, I've done 4 times, so I've had a bit of experience travelling around there as well, across the Aztec lands and the Maya. So I'm really keen on promoting awareness about all these sites, particularly in this modern generation who only have a 15-second concentration span. It's hard to keep them involved in anything really, but hopefully these sorts of podcasts can inspire some people to come along and dig a bit deeper for themselves, and we're here to help. So yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you, Matt. Um, let's go to Ricardo. Welcome.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Um, well, in my case, got involved with this by a long route that included the beginning with religious studies that had to be with the school I was in for my first years. That led me to mythology, that led me to history, that led me to myths and legends, that led me to astronomy, that led me to the ancient mysteries, that led me to the occultism. And so I've been gathering information about all these things and how it relates to consciousness, how it relates to ancient technology, uh, how it relates to this knowledge of the ancient world that started from the telluric energies to tell him where to build, to then the architecture of creating the buildings, incorporating archaeoastronomy and archaeoacoustics, as Phil mentioned, and how it all relates and how it was all lost. So, what were the cataclysms? So, I'm also interested in geology. I'm a catastrophist. Um, so, when we created the Institute for Natural Philosophy, for me, it's a great name because that's what I can consider myself. I'm a natural philosophist because I include all the disciplines that I can find. I'm also an archivist. So I have this very large database, including from books to papers to videos to conferences, material that is no longer available for the most part. Um, and I joined team with Phil a couple of years ago. We created last year created the institute along with Guy, and it's been very interesting to try and move from a 9 to 5 life into what we always eager to be, that is a full-time researcher, and that's we are trying to attempt right now. And thank you for having me once more.
Thank you, Ricardo. That's pretty cool. I see we have some guests in the audience as well. Hello, everybody. If you're here and if you have questions, just raise your hand or let me know in the comment section. Also, if you stay, not if you stay to the end, but if you're here, I will make a snapshot and we will do an airdrop for you guys. But we can talk about this later. So let's go to G. Hi, Zankuma. We worked together in the past. You started a really cool ancient map back, and then we got in talks together, and then we, yeah, like upgraded this map a bit, and we are looking forward to make a second version of this in the future. So welcome.
Hi, so yeah, thanks for having me. I'm Guy, also known as Ion Skuma. I've been interested in ancient history for a while now, and I'll just do a quick overview of my personal life. A bit like Ricardo, I've also been raised in a Catholic school, and there was a particularly transformative event for me that had happened when I was around 15 years old, where I got to visit a house museum that was still like a preserved time machine for 1920s house of very ancient and still very well preserved. Uh, this house with all the uh, beds and chairs and houses, everything was intact and preserved as it once was. And this was a very transformative event for me because for the first time I was able to really have a look into a different area, a different era, a different time where kind of my religious Catholic raising was kind of a bubble that was popped in that that day. So that led me to kind of uh, trying to think a little bit by myself and investigated ancient history and a lot of other philosophy topics. Namely alternative history is a big one for me, where I kind of like to specifically research architectonic and artistic hallmarks within a lot of ancient structures. This led me to kind of collecting a somewhat extensive a collection of ancient sites that have in common certain characteristics and certain hallmarks in stone and in artistic and decorative patterns in the sites that are that were once connected. So yeah, afterwards I met Phil and he invited me into his team of 17 plus researchers all around the world, where we just do a lot of research on alternative history and different topics from physics to philosophy. And then I met Ricardo, and we decided to start the Institute for Natural Philosophy. Like you said, we also partnered in Ancient Map that I think you have in your own website. And it's honestly been a wild ride for me. I also have a computer science degree. So in the institute, I'm currently the IT department, you could say, and I manage like the website and all the infrastructure required to managing the website. It's currently still under development, but slated to be on production in as soon as possible. So yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me. This is a great opportunity, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for showing up.
Awesome.
And yeah, I think we are. This is a really cool team we've put together here. So the goal for today is to make an exchange, to talk about what do we know um, about the Osiris Shaft. Um, you guys have tons of material. You have documents, images. We have been there in Egypt in 2018. We went inside the Osiris Shaft. That was a really weird feeling.
Uh,
I
22,
remember.
2022.
Oh, sorry. yeah, 22. Um, but it looks the same, I think, than 2018. All good. Yeah,
Mhm.
2018 was Peru. You're right. Yeah. I tried to share some images, and then um, maybe Matt, you can talk a bit
Uh,
about your experience.
yeah, I guess the shaft uh, in itself, uh, and its other name is the Tomb of Osiris, um, and of course, tomb Osiris, one of the ancient Parthenon of Egyptian gods, um, obviously piques some interest. But the shaft itself, its physical um, material conditions, how it was built, I didn't give it much thought until actually visiting the place, and we were taken there um, on a tour, and we went down there at the sunrise, and it was very interesting, heading down these shafts on these rickety old rusty ladders.
So
And
first, wait, Matt. So the shaft, where is it located? Is it on the Giza Plateau?
okay, yeah,
Uh,
so I'm
yeah.
sort of heading off into my own little story land here, but that'll come later. The
Yeah.
shaft is
Go ahead.
one of several shafts that are on the Giza Plateau, right in front of the three pyramids. Um, it's not as well obvious because it comes in from a sloped, slanted um, entry ramp rather than having a straight hole in the ground, which are several of the other pits up the top there. I think it was first first spoken of by Greek historian Herodotus back in the 500 BC or thereabout 5th century BC, and since then, I think he was told that it was the tomb of an ancient Egyptian king. So the myth was born, and everybody else that has come across it since then has been seeking the treasures of the lost king. And I think um, the next really documented case about the shaft, obviously thousands of years of history would have lapsed, but in modern times, I suppose the early 1800s was when exploration was taking off in Egypt, and that's when we get another record of it on some early cartographers' maps as they surveyed the whole plateau. So that was that's probably the start of where we could probably discuss how it might fit into the landscape on a broader view. I don't really have any opinions on that, whether it was actually the first shaft sunk into the plateau of many, or one thing that seems to connect all these different shafts is an underground hidden tunnel network, which they haven't completely explored yet. So they're not kind of sure exactly where all these tunnel lead to. The speculation, obviously, is that there's connections with the underground chambers up in the pyramids themselves. So I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on a broader kind of perspective of how the shaft fits into the landscape. Um, yeah,
Who's
I
first?
haven't got any. I haven't got any particular images I can point to.
Yeah, I'm already sharing the uh, bird's eye view,
Uh,
and you
uh-huh.
can see that the Osiris Shaft is next to the Sphinx, and then that there's a connection causeway to the
Yeah,
mortuary temple in front of the Chefren pyramid.
right.
And we
Um,
went down there to the most mm, lower level, and it was flooded.
y-
And then
yeah.
could you see anything there, or yeah?
well, we can describe in detail as you want to go down the shaft. But I guess in a summary, it's made of 3 levels. Each level has its own characteristics, and second level in particular, and the third level even deeper has a sarcophagus in the center of it. It's bounded by 4 pillars, of which are only the footings are left now. But the underground water table has risen up, so it's virtually submerged most of the time. In fact, most of the old documents we find is that water source would often come up even higher, and there's stories of the locals swimming in it, children,
Yeah.
back in the early 1900s. So it's been known as a water source for a little while, and it's actually been tapped. There was a pipeline built from it to source the construction of a university house, which is further down the slope. So the fact that there is water there, obviously tapping into the underground system or the aquifer, I think is probably very important, because it was probably one of the prime purposes it was built for. But we can't really say. Well, I can't really say just yet without too much more research and being
Yeah,
able to
but that's
crawl
an
through those
interesting
tunnels.
point. That is an interesting point you say there. What was it
Mm.
used for? So I would like to get the opinion of our guests. What do you think was? Do you have any information, or do you have an opinion on what it was used for? I mean,
Oh, there's lots of
it's named
opinions here, mate.
Osiris. It's named Osiris Shaft, but that was named by an Egyptologist who connected some dots. Um, I don't know if it's
Yeah, it
yeah.
was named Osiris Shaft by Zaki Hawass. He's a well-known
Yes.
Egyptologist, former um, from the Ministry of Antiquities, or whatever it's called, supreme leader. Um, but he called it that because it reminded him, or it's relevant to the description of Osiris's tomb um, in ancient Egyptian texts, which described it as being a sarcophagus on an island surrounded by 4 pillars, and like an island being surrounded by water. So it fitted the description. So he called it Osiris's tomb. And the shaft, obviously, being attached to that, it would be Osiris's shaft. And that was probably back in the late 80s or early 90s, so very recently.
Yeah. I think Phil, you wanted to have a comment?
Okay, so 1 or 2 things. When you look at, Rick, you can share this. When you look at the 3D image, it's a bit different our one than your one, okay? And what it doesn't show is, if you look at it, it looks like it's only got one shaft that comes down, and it actually hasn't. It's got 4 wells. So there's 4 responsive wells that come off that side. Now, if you imagine that those were like fluting systems, and water was actually a pumped system that went through there at one point, different pressures. And if we imagine that this structure was archeoacoustic, so it was designed, and I mean, as where you look at the black sarcophagi as it's named, what if these weren't sarcophagi? And let's be honest, the Osiris Shaft isn't the only place that shows these black boxes. There's 24 in the Serapeum. Zaya El Arouan, the inverted pyramid, the massive find there was a black box that's got nubs on it. They're semicircular nubs. And there's a great picture. You can go to Google and have a look, where in the 60s, when it was excavated, they're bringing it up the mainstay. Now, there's the same black goo found at Zaya Arawian as there is at the Osiris Shaft, okay? You can see at the Osiris Shaft that black goo actually looks as if it's coming through the wall on the ceiling. And these 3D models, they might look great, but it's actually not relative to what the Osiris Shaft looks like. However, if you look at the size of the actual boxes that are on the side, they're there, they are there, and they have got boxes within, but you can see on some of these boxes the sheer amount of quartzite that's running through them. So where there's quartzite, you could surmise functionality, because with water you're going to get a piezoelectric. With any sort of pressurized water, you're going to get a piezoelectrical effect. Now, we surmise that there was an original, more engineering schematic to what the Osiris shaft was designed for. Now, a couple of your dates were tiny bit wrong there, Matt. It's 1999 it was actually looked at properly, and the reason being is it was always overflowed with water, and Hawass actually pumped a lot of water out of there and managed to get a good look down there when there wasn't a lot of water. What is prevalent with that comment is there was always water there. So the Nile itself, the Philae temple was moved because of the Nile always coming up. The Cleopatra temple, you can see the Nile markings all the way around it. I mean, we're digressing slightly here, but the water being a predominant factor. Okay, so in the Osiris shaft, you noticed yourself when you were there that the water almost seems very or too much prevalent. I agree with you. I think there was actually a system of water that was used in there as a more functional factor. Now, Guy and I spoke before we came on the show with Rick about this, and on the 3D model, it almost looks like these, and I hate the word battery, but it almost looks like a charging system or some kind of archeoacoustic system that we're unaware of. Now, the plateau, and it's documented by scholars, is played with archeoacoustics at a C and an F chord. I don't know whether people know this, but the body plays at a C and an F chord. So whenever you were walking around it, you were getting natural health benefits. Well, if you had somewhere like the Osiris shaft that maybe could have been, I don't know, part of a more the Egyptians looked at it as a rebirth, didn't they? But maybe if injury was prevalent, you got health benefits, or there was some kind of learning centre. We've looked at archaeoacoustics at different rooms like Hypergym, Cephalini and Malta. It's got what's called an oracle room. All the specific subterranean chambers in Egypt that, held, let's say, more secrets than what we're aware of at the moment. And if we applied archaeoacoustics or different applications of technology rather than looking at it two-dimensionally, we might actually find what some of these shafts were for. Now, we've done studies alongside obelisks to see where the depths of obelisks correspond to depths of shafts. And you said about Hawass naming it the Assyrian shaft. Well, look at what it's near. It's actually near to the Assyrian, isn't it? It's not far from there. So was there a subterranean point that allowed these to be connected? Now, what we look at in archaeoacoustics is if specific mineralogies were joined, then communication through it's not war, it's through niches, are prevalent. And we looked for, before we came on the show, to see whether there were any of these niches within the Osiris chamber, and lo and behold, there are two of them on the second floor, on the floor. And what niches do, and what we've looked at on other sites, so there's corresponding hallmarks that suggest this, is they allow sound to be sort of almost amplified out to almost 200 meters within other chambers, not outside, but within other chambers that might exist somewhere else. So it makes it prevalent that there might be an adjoining chamber somewhere down there, to me, if archaeoacoustic properties are as prevalent as we're thinking, that we are only looking at a small part of what might be a larger schematic or an adjoining chamber, in my opinion, that all performed a lot bigger engineering feats than we're thinking. And I'm thinking more of an archaeoacoustic level, and something that might have created more of a hive mind around the people, more of a protective factor, would be more of my thought process.
That's that's very curious. Yeah, I hadn't actually thought of it in those terms. Yeah, the acoustic side of things, being more, I guess, curious about the actual sarcophaguses which had no bodies in them, and what other functional purpose these things could be. What was their purpose? I mean, they were incredibly heavy. They're made from a material not even found in Egypt. They'd had to travel many miles to bring that stone onto the site, and then put it into position down a 10 or 15 meter shaft, which is only wide enough to slip it down sideways, it boggles the mind. So I think, um, yeah, apart from what its purpose is, it's just like how was
Or,
that?
or with that in mind, mate, you've got to think, were the boxes already there? And then they're very old. Because if this was almost like a mining operation for things that you might have needed back in the day, so let's, for argument's sake, say, and I'm just putting it out there, the Serapeum boxes, let's say there's 24 of them right now. So 24 generations of time that needed their Ark of the Covenant, their restart. Were they buried there? Was the next one at Zayat Al Arayan? Was that a mining operation? Because, you know, you are looking at a huge subterranean, vast level of where these boxes actually were placed. And like you've said, it seems A, the boxes are more technological than the areas around them to mine for them. Were they there already? Were they hard to find? Well, yes, of course. And if you look at the Serapeum, and anyone can Google this, it's not me saying it, the mining lines at the Serapeum, you can see hundreds and hundreds of exploratory lines over the years and years and years and years and years of looking for them, if not thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years, we simply don't know. And
Mm.
how long does bedrock take to grow? How long does it take to grow around a box? I mean, we're talking millions of years, aren't we? So I'm not pushing dates back here. I'm just saying, wouldn't it be more prevalent, i.e., the Serapeum where you can only see the lids and the exploratory lines? The boxes haven't even been dug out. So how were they placed there? They simply weren't. They were in situ, you know. So with me,
Wow.
I think that we've got to look at other ways, methods of either producing the boxes, or they were already in situ when the actual monolithic, you know, tunneling systems were done around them. There's got to be another way, because 900 kilometers of movement of stone over sand with these kind of boxes with the technology involved just doesn't seem prevalent. It was seemingly easy. So we need to look at mineralogies. Was magnetics prevalent, i.e., plus and minuses? So if you can put something on, were we able to use that in conjunction with different frequencies? And then we would be able to naturally have a different technology that we couldn't have seen. So water, magnetics, mineralogy, and we may be able to see that you could, you know, like we've discussed this before, all of us together, that before a glass breaks, before it shatters, it doesn't actually just, if you look at that on a slow-mo, it actually wobbles and bends the glass before it shatters, doesn't it? And with that in mind, then we could apply that, and archaeoacoustics and frequency could then have possibly made things more malleable and easier to use, and so on and so forth. So, you know, we could be looking at a severely huge engineering plant here that was running really, really well. And where you've got those four, you know, those four, which it doesn't show on the 3D model, you've got the four kind of flutes, as we call them, that would have been sort of water pressure. Now, where else does that actually happen on the plateau? Well, it's in the internal workings of the Great Pyramid. You've got what's called the portcullis chamber at the top. And on that portcullis chamber, you've got a slab with a nub on it. Funnily enough, nubs are all over the plateau. Name drop in there,
Yep.
hashtag nubs. So anyway, on the portcullis chamber, you've got multiple slabs that look like they would have moved, or if water was there, could water have moved? I mean, we can surmise that acoustics were part of that as well, but that same thing seems to be going on as well with the Osiris shaft. And I think measurements of this shaft downwards would be massively huge for us to have and see whether acoustics would be prevalent. And I think that testing should be done on these theories, you know, that would be my opinion.
Look,
Very fascinating.
I would say that we have to consider, let's believe that the boxes were actually carved very far away and transported there and then lowered down and put it in place and so on. Let's believe that. So if we believe
Let's
that,
believe it.
we have to give high intentionality, high purpose in order to take
Yes.
such venture. And that purpose for
Yes.
sure is not to put someone that has already died. So it doesn't make any sense. Then we have
Yeah.
to associate this knowledge, this idea that the stones were put there either by further recently than Phil was saying, or back then when Phil was pointing out to the far reaches of time. It now doesn't matter. The matter is that they are not from that place. They were carved and they were transported and they were put there. Okay, either way, or besides that, they had to be manufactured in some production line of geopolymer next to it. But let's assume that they were carved and transported either 100,000 years ago, or 20,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago, or 4,000 years ago. That what matters is they took the time, the effort, the logistics in order to do such a thing that it's not easy to do. So even now, it wouldn't be easy to do. So that proves us that there was some clear intentionality in their purposes. Now let's associate this with the fact that Osiris is intimately connected with the myth of resurrection. So
Yeah.
if you assume this, and when we look at the plans, when we look at the 3D example of modeling, even without the tree shafts adjacent that are above the second level, that are like tuning shafts, that I state my case that water would only reach the bottom of to create that island that appears in the text. So if because if we fill that with water, as we've seen in the last hundreds of years, that place would be impossible to reach the coffins. So if you can't reach the coffins, there's no functionality. Therefore, the water couldn't be there when it was functional. So in order to be functional, the water was at the base and probably kept there by air pressure itself, like you see in submarines, but doing in the opposite direction. So instead of being in the bottom of the sea, it's beneath the how we call it, the bedrock. So
Mm. Right.
air pressure could maintain water at that level if the site was functional. So my point is, when I see those schematics, when I see those dimensions, when I see those small niches of 2.5 meters by 2 meters that are on the second level, all those chambers with coffins inside them, it clearly reminds me of some facility either for, let's say it's either for breeding something or for healing something. And we wouldn't hear it in text, in ancient texts. It wasn't for Osiris and that story, because that story is the story of a warrior that was betrayed by a brother. There's nothing new to us. If we stud royalty, is nothing new. And he
Yep.
was killed in such a way that he couldn't be rebirthed. So there was the technology to bring people back or to heal them from very serious illness and very serious trauma. So the fact is that hero was found, was brought to that facility, probably needed the bottom level that was the most powerful one, and was probably regenerated there if that was a healing facility. But it seems that all of the schematics shows us that it was purposeful, it was intentional, and therefore that effort must be rewarded with equal benefit. Either ways, you
Yeah.
wouldn't use the resources. So that's my point
Oh,
about it.
look, I think that's perfectly valid and reasonable. I mean, the amount of effort for that purpose had to be done with intent. I was just looking at a photograph. I don't know if you got it there, Martin, of the very first shaft as you come in from the top. Um, there's a very deep erosion on the sides of that very first shaft from the surface to the first level, and it occurs to me that it does look like water erosion,
Yeah. Are
but
you talking
lots,
about
lots.
are you talking about the waves on the shaft?
Yeah, there's waves.
Okay, those
Uh,
waves
wa-
are can be, we found them in archaeoacoustics research, so they can be intentionally carved to
hmm,
oscillate the reverberation of sound.
okay,
They don't need
okay,
to be erosion, because I don't think erosion would be that geometric.
that's a good point. I
you
had
have
started.
erosion.
I have to agree with you. I think that's purposefully done. That is, it's
Yeah,
not eroded into that shape. I'd be shocked if that was the case. I
yeah.
think we could possibly have a chat with a geologist on that, but um, I think I don't think that's the case. I think they seem very intentional, almost like the
Mm,
oscillation factors. You know, like you see these pillars in Egypt that almost look like they're lathed and circled, and that there was frequency within them. I think of that as a large scale version of these. I think these were actually cut in to give frequency and application of frequency, different frequencies and different benefits. We're yet to understand exactly what they were capable of with these, but look at the depth of the shaft. I mean, this could have
mm.
been their technology and their power, like a frequency technology that allowed them to cut such deep chambers. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
no. My first thought, I mean, after seeing those deep channels, which I just presumed was erosion, it reminded me of the deep erosion in the bedrock around the Sphinx. So of a similar nature, massive amount of water coming through and creating deep channels at
but,
some ancient past time.
but you wouldn't be
And in
wrong.
that case,
You
the
wouldn't be
water in
wrong.
that case would be coming from
Be-
the top and draining down into the lowest level, perhaps.
yeah, but what I would add is that you have to remember that summertime around 4000 BC, all of this area was struck by a massive amount of furious water. So what you see in the shaft was probably sharp edged, and it
Yes.
was rounded by the pressure of water of the system itself when it received all that amount of water coming up and down from that
Yep.
shaft that rounded those edges and created that erosion effect. So you would be right to say that there is water erosion on the whole Giza plateau, but that
Mm.
came from the cataclysm of around 4000 BC. If you have interest, read my paper on it. It's on academia. I can
Oh,
send it to you. And
yes, please.
I explain all of that in detail on how that really happened and motivated many of the myths of the ancient path and justifies, if you put it together, it justifies so much change in the world around that time. The only problem is we can't pinpoint the date. It could be 6000 BC. Probably there was one 6000 BC and then another one in 4000 BC. So we can't really manage. The academics like the dates of 3 3200, but at 3200 you don't have any significant cataclysm that can actually change the whole world in the from consciousness to technology to everything, because it's the transition from the Stone Age
Yeah.
into the Iron Age, so the Bronze Age in that case. But iron was
Right.
also already produced. And sorry for interrupting you. I just wanted
No,
to.
that's that's a good segue actually, because you're mentioning iron. The, there is a large vein of iron on the second level, across the ceiling and down one of the walls of one of the niches, and that kind of spurred some interest about whether either it was part of the purpose of having the shafts built, mining perhaps, mining the iron, or the iron was available to be used in the construction of the shaft or any part of it. So that's still up for debate. I have no idea. Just throwing that out there too. But the fact that iron was available and they knew about it, so it might have gone part way in creating tools which allowed them to dig straight down into bedrock, 15 meters in a square shaft. That sounds a little bit beyond reasonable. But
Yeah, but we see these machine marks, right, Matt, on the wall,
right,
and you can, if you
yeah,
touch it, you can feel it like rough edged, maybe hard machinery or a lot of people with a lot of time, I would say, that could carve that out of the bedrock,
but
and
the
then the
uniformity of those marks certainly look like large machine marks,
yeah
even comparable to modern mining machinery. So it does. I mean, and these aren't just restricted to the shaft. These machine marks are all over the world. China, I think it's called the Yangshan Caves.
Called the
Um,
Longview Caves.
Longview, sorry. Yep. And in many other places, even in Egypt as well. So, yeah, it boggles the mind. Just gonna look up.
So I think something I would add is the fact that we can find walls that look like there are machine marks. We can find iron ore. We have a sarcophagus, which maybe is not a sarcophagus, out of dicite material, which is not found in Egypt. So where is it from? And why did they use this special type of stone? Looks more like it's a technology device or some sort of facility um, than an actual grave or something that you would do for rituals. The connection to the afterlife with Osiris makes it interesting. So maybe there wasn't technology. Maybe they understood the afterlife better than we do. I'm pretty sure they did. So that is interesting.
Mm,
So, and we don't see that we see that in different sites on Egypt or all around the world, that you have material used in this specific spot. For example, Olante Tambo, you see 60-ton megalithic walls that the material is from the other mountain, like 100 kilometers away. So why not use the mountain you're standing on? And I think this plays into the theory of Phil with the archaeoacoustic technology. So I think that's a really good point, and that maybe researchers today should look more into this kind of stuff. So, to see it more like from a technological perspective, and not so much um, from the perspective of offering places and afterlife
mm.
itself. Yeah, yeah. You want to add
Yeah.
anything? No. Yeah. Go ahead.
The well, you mentioned offerings, and inside the second shaft, our second level on this shaft, there's uh, pottery, Egyptian shabtis, which are like little figurines. There's actually human bones there as well, and there's even the kind of a leftover remnant from Salim Hassan, who was one of the first guys to explore the shaft in the 1930s. He tried pumping out the water as well. And I think he said 4 years he tried pumping that water out, and he just couldn't get rid of it. It just kept refilling itself. And in one of the niches now is an old iron uh, wheel, like a pulley, which was left over as part of his operations. Um, so over the thousands of years, the shaft's been used for different purposes by different people. I think the pottery dates. I haven't quite got the figures in front of me, but it might be a later dynasty, maybe around 600 BC or thereabouts. So if we're talking thousands of years, that's more recent. The bones themselves, I think, are similarly offerings which were made around the same time in the late period. Um, so by this time, the cult of Osiris was fully enmeshed in the culture there, and so these offerings were part of a ritual which they'd probably undergo each year, I imagine. Um,
Yeah.
it was
Oh
actually
my
quite.
God.
It was actually.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. Oh no, it was actually quite interesting. When Martin and I travelled there, one of the group was a doctor from Florida, and not only a doctor, he was like a bone doctor. So he was amazed when he
Yeah, I just
saw
showed
these
these
bones
pictures.
sitting.
Yeah,
Right. He was just amazed, and he actually could identify every single bone digit of uh, whether it was the capella from the knee bone or different finger joints or part of a shoulder or whatever it happened to be. And he started lining all these bones up and explaining um, how they all fit together. And we were just stunned. I
that's
think
him.
one of
Yeah,
the
Google.
one of the most curious things that he came out was that mostly, if not all, of the bones were from the right hand side of the person. So it was all right hand finger bones, or right elbow, or right shoulder, um, and there were no left hand bones. So I don't know if it was like offering Osiris your right hand was a part of the traditional rituals in those days. It's a very strange coincidence, I think. But yeah, that was very curious. Um, yeah,
I was
sorry, Phil. I sort of,
Phil. You want to
yep.
talk? Go ahead.
Carry on, Rick. You're
No,
up,
I think it
mate.
was.
I was just
Go
saying
ahead,
that.
Ricardo.
I was just saying that we have to understand that our presence doesn't actually accommodates our pasts, especially in terms of language, in terms of culture, in terms of perception of reality. So when we talk about rebirth, we have to keep in mind that if you don't have medical care, even a small cut can kill you. So you're already dead to the tribe. If you have an injury from an animal or something, you are already dead to the tribe. So if the tribe suddenly has a mechanism that can heal you, it will bring you from the dead because you were already dead when you had the injury. So I
Yeah.
think you see my point. So we
Yes.
have to think in terms of what would be their reality in terms of injuries. So if you have someone that today it's a triviality, you just have to reach the hospital in time. For them, it was certain death because they wouldn't have ways to fix it outside these facilities. So when these facilities are developed or found or again and tested and this was discovered that people that went there felt better or something and they keep testing. So I think that's I just wanted to put it there that when we talk about rebirth, we don't actually need to be thinking about Jesus Christ. So
Right.
so
That's a
although
very good point.
it might be possible, but I'm just thinking more in terms of healing what was otherwise a certain death for the person that has that.
Hmm. A spiritual death, more than a physical death in that case, for some reason.
Yes, it happens first because you're already dead to the tribe. They can't do anything to help you
Hmm.
unless they have a technology that allows them to heal you.
Hmm.
Like today, if you're in the middle of the woods and you get shot, seriously shot, right? And you don't have a machine that can bring you back from the dead because you're already dead. You're just spending your last minutes while your body shuts down. So
Right.
that's my meaning. That's my meaning.
Wow.
It's like you can bring a drowned people up a person up to 20 minutes. I think 22 minutes. I think it's the record of bringing back to life. Although there are some peculiarities of people that was found a day after they were frozen and they managed to get back to life and so on. But the normal, let's say 20 minutes, it means that you could be actually dead for 20 minutes from your injuries, brought back to this place and be brought to life. So we also say that the drowned people came back, right? So it somehow it has resurrected from the dead because it was dead. So that's something like that.
Hmm.
This what he's actually describing is true, and it's not actually just this place that has that as well.
No.
There's a place in Portugal called Sintra that also was designed for exactly the same thing, and it's huge. It's, for want of a better word, like a spiraling well that descends massively downward, and it's carved beautifully. And it's said that the bottom, where there's water as well, funnily enough, it's very similar, yet the Osiris Shaft's a hell of a lot more crude. This was built a lot later on, but in the same vein. And it's described that Sintra, in its original state, although it's been redone in present day, was similar for rebirth. And Rick and I and Guy have been doing a lot of research and are visiting it this year to see, the archaeoacoustic properties there and do some testing and so on and so forth to see exactly what was going on and whether we can find any hidden frequencies there, play the ones that we know and also do others and document them, and then hopefully get a paper done on the results of what's done there. And I think it'd be intriguing then to take those results and see whether you could get, or we could get, corresponding results from somewhere like the Osiris Shaft. And if then we're seeing, because I don't know whether you know this, but within our studies, you find what's called a trident of frequencies. And it means that the engineers were using a very similar schematic to find um, telluric energies that they were going to build over ley lines on. It wasn't just we're going to pick this ley line. They picked them very, very astutely, which means they had engineering knowledge before they started, because they knew exactly where they were going to place said building, then tower, then magnetics, then using, say, the quartzite and mineralogies of stone that we're seeing within the bases of these hypogeums and shafts and so on, with these boxes and oracle rooms and so on that we're finding. So I think it's prevalent that we do the testing on each site that we go on and see if we can find any corresponding trident hallmark frequencies that are being played. And there's teams worldwide and globally that are going and doing these archaeoacoustic tests. So
I have a
um,
question for you, Phil. Um, so I'm a mechanical engineer and I have a lot of experience with computer-aided design. And one thing I did in the past was for a friend, I designed a 3D model for him to 3D print stuff and test some things. Would it be interesting if I or if we create a 3D model of the Osiris Shaft, and could you somehow use that for to do acoustic tests or simulations? This is just a thought that came
no, I think that's
to
an
my mind.
excellent idea. I think it's brilliant. I think if we could find a way to do that and run the tests from a computer using 3D models, then I think we could get the testing done specifically quicker rather than being on site. Absolutely, I think we could do that. I think it's the next level of research that really I would love to get to. So it's definitely something I would love to talk about. Yes, please.
Oh, cool. That's yeah, interesting.
You,
So
you know that,
uh,
that at
we,
least
yeah,
5% of papers on archaeoacoustics right now are being done by audio models. They just need the dimensions and the scan of the place, and then they use it to
Right.
reproduce sounds digitally inside those digital chambers and get the results.
how many percent?
About 5% right now, and increasing because people
Okay,
prefer to do this at the lab than actually move a team to the site and install microphones.
Of course.
If something fascinating is found, then a team will be sent to the site and try to measure
exactly.
it later on.
Yes,
That's really good.
because yeah, yeah,
That
I
Yeah.
think
thing,
we can do that in the
that
future.
thing,
So yeah,
the pinnacle of what we want to achieve is run these frequencies. We call it the hidden trident of frequencies. Actually, we're going to run them in all of these shafts using what we discussed at the beginning, like the obelisk measurements. Wouldn't it be, if the obelisks correspond, then we definitely know they were looking for certain depths. Why they were looking for certain depths was mineralogy, the specific stone, like you discussed. Was it to mine in general, specific ores, ions, whatever it might have been, you know? So it seems to me that there's so many areas of this mystery that we can actually answer if we could replicate really good 3D models
yeah,
on computers, and we could do the archaeoc, we could do it so much quicker, and we could have answers so much quicker. And
Mm.
like you say, then if we find something interesting, we go on site, boots on ground, and we get the work done and get these frequencies applied on the site. But we could do, I would love to. That's exactly what we want to do as an institute. So yeah, I'd be honoured to have you on board with that.
I think
yes,
the main hurdle of research like this, and I'm no expert, but I'm mainly concerned about replicating the mineralogical properties of the stones in these sites, because from our research, we've came to realize that it's a very important factor to the reverberation of some of these frequencies, and the type of stone that's involved in the site is also
Absolutely.
very unique. And if we want to make a 3D model or 3D simulation of some of these sites, we need to set the correct parameters for each and every one of those stones to actually what's the content of quartz in the stone, what's the content of, right? So I think that's
Mm.
an important step. But again, I'm
I
no
think
expert.
I have
I'm
I have the paper that shows all the proceedings, the softwares,
uh-huh.
all of it, how it is done. I have a few of them on that.
So something we can contribute as well in this point is we have a very close contact to a geologist, and she already wrote a scientific paper for us or an article with sources and scientific background. And
Yeah.
she told me that it's not the same if you have like pink granite. It can have different density, uh, but it's still the same granite, you know. So just because you say it's like granite, it doesn't mean that it's a fixed density. There are there are limits, like
Mm.
lower and upper limits to this. So in order to do this absolutely correctly, I think you have to go to the site later on. But for first tests, I agree with you guys. Of course,
Mm.
a model or maybe a 3D model can help. Yeah.
Yeah. I think certainly you have to proof test it in a, well, in the simulation on computer, without doubt, because of the well, comparing, like you were just saying before, about sending a whole team to an ancient site to measure acoustics is, it's a different venture. But I just was thinking that something like the King's Chamber, where you've got perfectly smooth granite walls in a box shape, would be quite simple to simulate on a computer. But something like this Osiris Shaft, where all the caverns are actually roughly hewn, there's no real flat surfaces, would not produce standing waves or any resonant frequencies that you could probably pull out easily, even in a simulation.
and
So
one thing to
that's
remember
this.
as well, Matt, is that we're looking for infrasounds as well. And I don't know that we can get those infrasounds by using a model and acoustics within a computer environment. I don't think it's viable. So I think we would be missing at least a third of what we would need on site. And Guy's correct. The reverberation of the stone, especially in places like West Kennet Barrow in Scotland, the testing that happened and what results were gleaned were from have being on site and those reverberations of stones what gave the portal that this little lad, saw what he saw and could have walked through and so on and so forth. Now
Mm,
we're only going to get those effects if we're on site, but I do agree that I think
yeah,
if we get
it's a good point. I
ground
mean, infrasound, you're
groundwork
meaning like below 20 hertz, that with below our audible hearing range. So you're
yeah,
looking at very low frequencies. Yeah,
Yeah, beneath 16, because humans can hear,
16. Okay.
yeah, from 16 to 20, although most people only hear from about 20.
Yeah.
Uh, but the thing is, those models that are used by academics, and this is why, because you cannot pinpoint the actual keys, but they are not looking for the keys. They are only looking for the acoustic properties of the site that are then enhanced and enriched by studying the site itself. But if the site doesn't have acoustic properties, if they don't see that the shape itself and that specific code for that kind of mineralogy, although it's not pinpointed perfectly, but allows them to see if those standing waves are created, though they appear on the models, even though
Mm,
they are rough, they are sorry, flat on the models, but they appear because it's the structure that creates. Now, the effect and the
okay.
pinpoint
Yeah.
is then needed to go on site and see, tune the frequency in order to actually excite the exact point of the stone frequency. So, but you
Yep.
can test by modeling, you can test the acoustic property.
Mm,
The sound resonates, if it creates standing waves by the shape itself. That's why the Osiris
yep.
shaft is so curious with those three
Mm,
additional shafts that don't appear on the 3D model, because they are free. And again, as Phil mentioned, it's the trident of frequencies. Each one of them could be conducive of a different kind of frequency. So you have um, subsonic, not subsonic, how do you call it, infrasound on one. You can have that medium that we have in found that is around, can vary between 33 and 44, and then there is another group that varies from 96 to 116, which actually are the ones that I used to mess with our mind in a positive way. So that's what they've also found in labs, because they went there and try, oh, we know it's 120 hertz. We know it's the frequency of the brain. But then they found out that each individual was different, and that could range from 96 hertz to those almost 120. Or some people go at up 130, but they are very rare. So that can be all
Okay.
found in a model. Just the key is to actually
Yes.
activate the site. You cannot.
Yeah.
You cannot.
Right.
So,
Fascinating.
so,
I'd love to be
so,
part of some sort of adventure like that.
so
We're
there
going to
were
we're going to
We up.
Portugal on the 22nd of July there or thereabouts to do the acoustic work at Sintra. So what we'll do is get you online when we're over there, and you can witness some of it.
Wow. Yes, please.
And have a look at what we're doing, and we'll get you on like a computer feed like we're on now, because we'll need everything that we've got when we go traveling there. And I mean, the relevance of that is, like I said to you earlier on, is very similar to the Osiris Shaft in the actual makings of it and the written history of it. What they were trying to achieve in the building of it, was that the original purpose? That remains to be seen. So, we'll get the acoustics done there and the testing done, and then we've got something to actually go off. And if if we do a model of the Osiris Shaft and we get some testing done, if they fall in similar ranges, where then we know there was an engineering schematic going on completely 100%. We know that anyway. We're just corroborating the evidence, so to speak.
So,
Brilliant.
question. Today, or in modern times, we have something that's called binaural beats. Have you heard of this guy? Of this stuff, guys?
Yeah, it's good brainwave stimulator. Good for putting yourself
Exactly.
to sleep
Exactly. So what do
or
you
in
do?
altered states.
How does this work? This actually works like you have two frequencies for, let's say, for example, 100 hertz, and then you have a second frequency, 104 hertz, and the difference between this is 4 hertz, and this is then I'm not sure, delta wave or something. And these waves are specifically good for the brain, and this is proven. This is not like esoteric hocus pocus. They did tests with this, that you can bring your brain into different states with these binaural beats. For example, if you can't sleep, you need this binaural beat, and then you get into a sleep state. Your brain emits more of these waves. If you want to be focused for hours on work, and I'm doing this myself for work sometimes, if I don't want it to be distracted, I use binaural beats. I already and I crafted my own binaural beats for this purpose. So what if we use this now in modern times to give ourselves, our body, or bring our body into a state of consciousness? What if the ancient Egyptians or whatever civilization was there first used this kind of technology to put themselves into a state of consciousness? And I'm talking about very different states of consciousness than we are in our modern world. So, for example, if you go to a Buddhist temple and if you meditate, they will tell you at some point after 2 weeks, they tell you that you can create a DMT inside of your brain while meditating. This is a substance that gets only produced when you die or when you take ayahuasca in your pineal gland. You can access different types of consciousness, different, consciousness or worlds. This is a very deep topic, which is absolutely not related to the Osiris Shaft. But if we are talking about frequencies, and if we are talking about the Osiris Shaft being a chamber for frequencies or a technological device, could the Osiris Shaft be an ancient headphone for creating binaural beats to bring your body into a specific state of
I
consciousness?
think that's an absolutely brilliant idea, and I would have to say yes. And I think there was multiple versions of exactly that. And I think you could probably have used it as a protective measure. So we looked at it at Latri, which is a massive city in Italy. And the cyclopean work that surrounded the area seemed as if it was kind of an amplification. So if you went anywhere near there and you weren't, let's say, quote unquote, attuned to that specific site, when you got there, you had these kind of, well, they're like vortexes, magnetic vortexes. So when you go through the doors, these can be measured as well on a camera. You can take pictures of them. You reverse engineer a camera, and when you take a picture, it actually looks at. It's not a photo as you'd look at it. It looks at sort of like it's the magnetics, isn't it, Rick? It looks at behind that, and you can see when you walk through the gates. They're almost like if you were welcome, you were welcome. If you weren't going to go through there. And it's written that like armies can go towards there, and they felt so scared when they got near it. They never got anywhere near it. I mean, so would this or could it be considered a defensive system as well? Or could it, if everybody worked together in harmony at one point in time, and we were engineers that worked together and had the same technologies, could it have worked together to keep the peace if working well as well, So we came to the conclusion it's massively defensive, so stopped people. And maybe if you had specific crystals and you were known to certain areas, or you could walk through it, or your karma, your person was attuned to that area, you could walk through them. If it wasn't, then you weren't welcome. Could it be something like that, do you think?
Well, it's not without some background. I mean, there's also indigenous cultures that have many areas in their areas where it's no-go zones, or the spirits live there, don't go there, or this is the tree of the dead souls of children where you can't go there. There's all sorts of sacred places that are imbibed with some form of energy, if it's spiritual or not, astral or not, um, which affects people just by being close to those places. So yeah, I guess there's something in
Fascinating,
that.
yeah, fascinating,
Yeah,
absolutely fascinating.
you have to keep in mind that anthropology, especially paleoanthropology, has identified that all places that has these mystical abilities that are related with sound were considered sacred places. So, and they were often decorated with rock art, so they knew where those sacred places were. So they were used for very different reasons. So not just one purpose. So you could be related to healing, could be related to defense, it could be related to hive mind, a community. So, and this is not too far fetched because we've seen, for instance, in the Second World War, they used infrasound weapons with terrible effects. The problem is everyone was affected. They couldn't direct it, so they abandoned it. But the effects were there. And as Phil was saying, for instance, the Groparello Castle has to this day the capability in his within his IPGM and with his tower to create that infrasound effect that prevented it from being conquered century after century because people couldn't get near it because of the infrasound. So there's a bubble. Then you have the ancient city of Gore that Alexander the Great couldn't conquer because it has exactly this system. It created a bubble of infrasound, and after sending the army one or two times and the army coming back completely insane and incapable of fighting anymore, he recognized the technology and decided to flood a gigantic valley in order to eradicate that city instead of conquering it. And that's not like Alexander at all. So
Mm.
great powers came to the guy that found that drained the valley 600 years later. He conquered half the country in a matter of 2 years to because he had that kind of technology. It appears in mythological texts. So all this to say that your proposition is not a proposition is a fact that the ancient world
Well,
used sound for different purposes. So and it's well known that if you use psychedelics, be it DMT pure, be it DMT used by ayahuasca, that it has a combination that allows you to keep the DMT in your stomach in order to have the effect. That's the only thing divine it's there for. It's to prevent that effect. That's why you have to take DMT either by smoking it or in the form of ayahuasca, because if you eat it, it doesn't do anything for you because your gut annihilates the part that is psychoactive. So that's why ayahuasca lasts so many hours. The fact is, if you use psychedelics and sound therapy at the same time, it might be too overwhelming. It might give you experiences that in Peru, for instance, the shamans would reply that they were within the world of the dead. And that's somewhat what you see in DMT, because everyone has similar uh, perception when taking it. Um, in fact, of images. The animals vary, the identities vary, but the message is always very specific. It's like you're talking to yourself but knowing the past and the future and the present. So it's like yourself that is in community with all things. That is the actual link to the Akashic record. So that's why you can get so much knowledge for it. But it seems that this all could be achieved by sound alone. It seems that this search for the psychedelics came after this technology was lost, and a new type of system had to be used in order to regain these domains that were lost. And those caves that you've talked about, I'm sure of it, that they have channels of air that conduct wind or water sound, that create this infrasound that can be used for good. It can give you the sensation of awe, the sensation of community with the divine, because it's not compressed. But if you start introducing sound to these places and you start to compressing the waves, you can drive someone mad because it makes it live his worst fears. So, and this is documented in papers. So it's not a conjecture, it's a fact that it was used. We are just rediscovering, as we are rediscovering every kind of technology that we are using, but we are just rediscovering
Yes.
not always in their best form or the way it was done before.
Yeah, I
Yes.
have some insights about this from personal experience that I could also share. Specifically regarding the DMT experience, I mean, I've never taken it personally, but I do have something that's called hypnagogic hallucinations, which is hallucinations that kind of will happen before you go to sleep. I don't have this every night, but it usually happens either when I woke up in the middle of the night or either after a nightmare or something like that. And I report the same experience as DMT psychonauts do, which is there's a tunnel, right? And then this highly convoluted and complex hypergeometry seems almost non-Euclidean in a way where it doesn't really make sense in the three-dimensional world we live in. It's more of a just juxtaposition of like higher dimensional geometric fractals. I see a lot of this manifested in the temples from India. I mean, the architecture there is specifically like very visually reminiscent of DMT experience. But to get back to the point, I mean, you were talking about this vault of information is almost like a cloud. Some people call it the Akashic Records, right? Where seems to be a certain vault of information. I personally experience my personal experience is it's not information directed like the way we are used to speaking to one another through sentences and language. It's more like a visually symbolic way of speaking, where the symbols themselves transform into morphological patterns of their own, and that in itself, an experience, will then actually bring forward a message that then can be decoded by neurological systems in the brain into actual concepts and meaning and sentences. But the pure morphological symbolism is seems to me to be the default system for this kind of cloud intelligence or whatever you want to call it. I don't really have a name for it, but sometimes I get different symbols like the Templar cross seems to me to be some allusion to mixing of different frequencies. Also, the Ankh also showed up once. So yeah, I think I'm crazy,
Yeah,
but
I think
uh,
it's called morphonic field,
yeah,
and that's what they were measuring when they researched macaque apes, and they teached one macaque a certain technique of opening a nut or something. And the interesting thing was that a couple of weeks later, and I mean, they checked if some apes like went off the group, and they all stayed together. But some weeks later, another tribe was using this technique, but they were not connected. They were on another island. So this is something that cannot be scientifically proved, but it's something that happened and
No,
cannot be explained.
on the contrary, it has been proved.
Okay.
You, yes, it has been proved thanks to Rupert Sheldrake because he
Yes,
reported.
Sheldrake. Yes,
Yes, yes,
you're right. Yeah.
he reported that mice in a lab in China were trained to find their way through a maze. Okay, so what they found is after the mice in China find a way to the end of the maze, then the same test was being done in several different places in the world. And what they found out is the more they do the test, the quicker the mice resolve the puzzle.
Yeah, but it was a different mouse every time,
No, no,
right?
no, 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 no. Yes, obviously it
Yeah.
was a different mouse, but the fact
Yeah.
is the problem kept being solved faster and faster and faster
Yes.
until it was no challenge for the mice. And the mice were unrelated in different places in the world. It just, the maze was just the same. So
Okay.
by doing this kind of experiments, they proved empirically that there is a global network of communication that at least some animals have access in order to learn things that they didn't knew, because this happens with the newer generations. The new generation, the more information we will have if the mice keep solving the puzzle again and again and again. It adds information to the cloud. So
Yeah.
it,
And
also wow, it
go
also
ahead.
seems to uh, I can't figure out what the word is, but seems to suggest that evolution is not a million year process. It seems to suggest that it could happen in a matter of generations. So that's a very interesting thought, at least to me.
Exactly, exactly. And I would also add to a comment that you made before about the pineal gland. And I would like to say that the pineal gland is very intimately related to Osiris and therefore very intimately related to the Osiris shaft. It has
Thank
something
you.
to do it.
Yes, I wanted to come back to the Osiris Shaft exactly, because what we were talking about the last 20 minutes is that there might be a morphonic field or some sort of technology that we can't access on our modern world, but maybe the ancient Egyptians had technology to access them, and they used what they had. They had a lot of stone. They knew about sound. They knew how different density of stones vibrates. Maybe they lay down in the sarcophagus. Is the same thing than when we use an headphone. It's the connection between Osiris this discussion.
Mm.
Look, I don't think that that is the connection with Osiris. I think
Mm.
the connection is archaeoacoustics and communication. I think there's multiple ways to use that communication over multiple sites. let's deal with what we know, physical evidence and what we can see. The name of the Osiris Shaft and what goes with it, let's just push that to one side. Let's look at the physical evidence. We have a shaft that's been engineered. To have engineering, you need to have had learning over a vast amount of time. You need to know where to place the shaft. You need to know how to make the shaft. You need to know the mineralogies you're going to use and the water. With the fluting that we've found and the pressures that could have been used, there was a vast amount of knowledge that's gone into the build of just the Osiris Shaft alone.
Mm.
We can surmise from what we know engineering wise in this room. There's degrees, physics degrees, engineering degrees, historical degrees, computer science degrees, vast amounts of knowledge. But let's try not to surmise anything. We know that there was a lot of water there. With a lot of water and it going up and down at different points of time, with the fluting, we know that there was vast amounts of water travelling up and down a system that was engineered and built. Now, does that corroborate anywhere else? Yes, it does, because what we do see are hypogeums and rooms, water systems positioned over different ley lines globally. So this is a global knowledge and an application of something that was known over a vast area. Now, you said that the Egyptians used what they found. Well, I bet the Egyptians thought all their Christmases or Rasmuses or Assyrian misses came at once when they were given the accolade of it was theirs. I think what they were actually doing through the hieroglyphs is similar process to what we're doing, and that's trying to find out exactly what went on. And I think that they got very prevalent and good at using what they found. Do I think they knew how to use it properly? No, I don't at all. I think the actual use came before that. So what we need to do is deal with what we do know and the physical evidence and the testing, archaeoacoustics wise, that we can go and do to prove what these shafts were actually for. Now, it's going to be very limited that we're going to be allowed to do any boots on ground testing at the Osiris Shaft, but I think it's prevalent that we do a 3D model of testing on the archaeoacoustics, and if we can find corroborating evidence somewhere else that it's exactly the same frequencies, then there's your engineers. And we can corroborate that. What the functionality was remains to be seen exactly, because we've discussed feelings of awe, fear. Could it have been a hive mind? Could it have worked for the civilization? Could it have been global? All answers that need to be found, aren't they? And I think we can do that if we work together on the archaeoacoustics to come together with an answer and corroborate the evidence. That's what we need to do, in my opinion.
I think I totally agree with you, Phil. I think the Osiris as a god was a bit of a latecomer in the Egyptian history. He wasn't. I can't remember exactly the dates, but it wasn't one of the very first gods there. I was just reading about the Shetayet of Sokar. And the Shetayet of Sokar translates to the hidden place of the ancient falcon god from Memphis, which Sokar later morphed into as Ta Sokar Osiris, a trilogy god, and Osiris was the cult of Osiris was born from that. But even so, the mythology around the shaft itself being a tomb of a dead god was probably still quite an early cultural a cultural feature, and without sort of knowing exactly when this Shetayet of Sakar was in effect, if they're talking very early, then it still doesn't quite explain to me anyway, the physical building of the shaft, and not in isolation either. The other shafts in the area and its impact on the water table and the functional purpose of these things. Whether later on it was determined to be acoustically viable to introduce morphonic fields or binaural beats that the ancient Egyptians learnt to adopt to. That's the second thing. I think it's an evolving thing, perhaps, from whatever the original purpose of the shaft was. So that's how I see it. It'll be a bit older than at least the 4th or 6th dynasty Egyptians, where some of this stuff was dated. I've actually got one reference here from Professor Robert Temple, who wrote a paper on this place, and he dated the granite sarcophagus at the very lowest layer to 2370 BC. And now that is actually, in fact, 1,000 years older than the pottery shards and the bones in the second level. So the dating of when these levels were built needs to be
I'd love
considered
to
too. I
know
don't
how
think
that was dated. I really would love to know how he's even entertained dating the stone at the bottom. Because
right.
what carbon is he dating that from? And how accurate would that carbon have been? And I'm sorry, there's no way of him physically being able to do the stone dating on that specific stone, in my opinion. So I don't know how he's come up with that date.
Well,
Yeah, I
think
could
he's
probably
talking,
find out, but I haven't got it here.
I think he's
Ricardo?
talking about the biological remains. So that indicates the last
Around
time it
like,
was used,
yeah.
not how
Okay.
when it was built. So
Okay. Okay.
I think that's a different. But I need to just to say that we need to realize that the ancient Egyptians were not stupid. They were not delusional people that believed that statues spoke and that the gods used to rule the country and then left it to their sun gods or the ones elected to rule in their place. So we need to see that all of this might have uh, some truth in it. So if the statues were actually alive and spoke, could that mean that the statues actually spoke, as we've seen in ancient sites, that sound can be transmitted from a place to a place? Could it be just a simple kind of technology that was used that made Egypt so magical? The fact that when it was passed down by what they call the gods into the humans, and when humans start to use it, how many generations would be needed for all this high tech technology that could be used by healing for this or that was barely forgotten and then tried to revitalize but never worked properly. As Guy as perceived in the images, one of the coffins was blown from the inside out. So it was an experiment that went wrong. They tried the wrong frequencies, what they did wrong. So uh, we we need to see what was before the Egyptians because they inherit much instead
Yep.
of creating it. That's
Yeah.
why they are great at the beginning.
They have to do that, mate, because, like, look, at the end of the day, you look at drastic truths that are definitely there. You had a matriarchal society. Why? Matriarchal society because women live longer than men. Why? Men got a bacterial disease where they bled from downstairs and it killed them young. So if you were that advanced in engineering and medical knowledge in a specific way, men wouldn't have been dying earlier from bleeding from downstairs and not able to control a bacterial disease with an antibiotic. So what you have to ask yourself is, if they were that advanced, where did the engineering and schematical geological knowledge come from? Not to build anything to do with the Great Pyramid, just to level the Great Pyramid. Where did that knowledge come from? Where did the manufacture knowledge come from? Where did it all come from? It had to have come from somewhere. So there had to have been passed down knowledge from somewhere. Like we know pre-dynastic Egyptians didn't have the knowledge that people are saying that they had. Like I always suggest on my channel, copper sticks and stones didn't do that. 2,350,000 blocks didn't magically appear around the engineering schematic of the Great Pyramid in 20 years, one block every 5 minutes moved into place. That is not possible. And I'm a naval engineer. that's designed helicopters. That is not going to happen. So we couldn't do it today if we tried. So we're looking at a very advanced engineering culture, number one. They knew exactly what they were doing. They had physics, mathematical, geological knowledge, and they were exceptional at it. But did they just apply things in a different way? So if you had knowledge of archaeoacoustics, the amplification of, you knew mineralogies of stone, which means that you could maybe control the magnetics of a stone. So it would have been easier to move larger stones if it was repelled from the stone above. You could almost push it down the line, which seems more feasible than it was rolled on logs across the sand over 900 kilometers. We would have needed a system in place where underneath the ground mineralogies were attached, water was running. And do we get that? Yes, we do. We do get these hypogeums. We do have temples specifically etched across this. Rick and I have done a video on the Institute where we show a map from, pardon my dating, I think it's 1375, if memory recalls. And it actually shows you how water systems were used alongside temples. And what we're looking at is communication through archaeoacoustics. And we feel that these temples are specifically placed so that communication could have been used. You spoke of Alexander the Great earlier on. Well, it's well documented that he could get a message from India to Macedonia in 7 days. It was meant to be on horseback, change the horse every 11 miles. Does it seem more feasible that it was communication and we're reading the text ever so slightly wrong? And that he was able to communicate temple to temple a message back from India to Macedonia within that time seems more feasible to me than running horses. So I think that we could be just, it's that, like, down to interpretation with a lot of things. What are we seeing and what were they writing about? And it seems to me the Egyptians were trying to tell us how they were trying to break down this mystery, what they'd come across, and revered what they were seeing as well, and rightly so. So do we.
Yeah,
Yes, I would like
totally.
to. That's really good. I would like to close it on that thought that the Egyptians knew exactly what they were doing, that they were not stupid, and that not every site we find today is another worshipping site of their sun god.
Mm.
We talked about archaeoacoustics. We talked about the spiritual path and the connection between frequencies, sound, and spirituality. And we think that we have some ideas about the Osiris Shaft being some sort of a technology device, and that the ancient Egyptians maybe even found this or used it later for their purposes, and then that there are differences between the dating of stones and bones, and that we have anomalies like the dicite stone, and that this could be a hint into that they were using specific materials to gain specific vibrations out of and frequencies um, out of their technological device. So I would like to leave it there and maybe have one last questions, or you can add something to this. Of course, I will not leave it in the room like this if you disagree. And and of course, my last question would be: where should our resources be spent next? I mean, we talked about a possible 3D model. I'm totally up to this. We need the dimensions of the shaft, and then I can create a 3D model that you can use for testing. What would be, what should we use our resources that we have in our group, in our team here next? What do you think?
Take us on full time to do all your research for you and send us on sites where we can prove archaeoacoustics are the way to activate the sites that were once prevalent on our planet, and they're definitely still active. It's just we haven't looked in the right ways to activate them properly. The archaeoacoustic testing is massive, massive. We've been speaking about Egypt today, the Osiris Shaft. You would think, wouldn't you, that mass amounts of archaeoacoustic testing had been done all over the place. relatively none. It's
Mm.
zero. And the one set of testing that I'd done, the set of people got that scared, seriously, they got that scared because drums were playing. Brrr. The reverberations on the Great Pyramid were that bad. They got a feeling of fear that no more testing has been allowed to have been done there, which I find ridiculous. Now, permissions are very difficult to gain, and other sites not so much. So I would love any help and skill sets on being able to complete the archaeoacoustic testing, get the models done, how we use those models, and how we apply this testing to different sites and corroborate the evidence. And I'd love help on that. And basically, we're just looking at ways to, you know, fund our way onto sites to do the testing boots on ground. I know that, and do this full time. That's where you can help us with networking and working with us as closely as possible. And yeah, thank you for your help. We really appreciate it.
That sounds brilliant. uh, yeah, I don't think I've got any closing remarks there. I think um, it's an enigma, as one of many. But yeah, whatever we can coordinate ourselves to help. I was just thinking the 3D modeling of the shaft itself should be readily achievable. There's some pretty good measurements around on some of the diagrams I've looked at through some of the papers that Ricardo shared with me. So yeah, if we can manage to pull that together, that'd be a great step forward.
I think to have a genuine 3D model, not one that's floating around that's only showing half of the shaft, would be
No,
good.
no,
And
I'm
we can get
talking,
that out
yeah,
there and shared, number one. So it's a genuine image that people are looking at as a proper schematic as the Osiris shaft, because it isn't out there right now.
yeah,
We've
it
all
should be a
seen that,
detailed
Mm.
model. Yeah,
So it'd be nice that other people would have that model available, and then anyone can go and do whatever they want with it. We will be applying acoustic testing to it, but it would be nice
Mm.
for everybody to have the correct model. Yourselves and the one that we had wasn't correct today. There needs to be the one with the 4 flutes, the 4 other kind of wells, if you like, that go directly up that we showed on this video today. And then
Yeah.
we can start really working with the correct physical evidence schematic, if you get me.
I think also a
Mm.
good start would be to have someone either from our team or your team or just someone that's going to Egypt in the near future to maybe take a LiDAR scan to the Osiris shaft, and doesn't need to be uh, the whole Osiris shaft in one LiDAR scan file. Could be like the different levels, different LiDAR scans, and I mean that would be a good start. That would give us at least the basic dimensions of what to test for and how to model the shaft itself. And yeah, I
and the
mean,
problem is that you don't really get access to this shaft, so you have to
yeah,
know somebody or have to pay a shit ton of money.
yeah, I think it's
And
two thousand
if
dollars.
yeah, and if you're a group, that's fine. Everybody pays $150, but then you're down there with a group. So good luck
Yeah,
with your lidar scanning.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's not an easy task to accomplish, though. So
yeah, you're right.
yeah,
No.
Well, to answer your previous question about what we should do next. I mean, I think we have discussed this, but might as well discuss it again because I think it's a very interesting side project and something that we could really invest some time in, which is the Digital Alexandria project, where I think it would be a great way of like creating a decentralized database of information, either the images or documents, but essentially creating a hub for every researcher that wants to research a certain hallmark or a certain location to have all the available information about that site, and keeping all of it decentralized is also uh, a big incentive.
Mm.
And yeah, I think for I'm down for it. I'm always happy to embark on these projects. So yeah, if you guys want to collaborate, let's do it.
Yeah, and this is a shout out to our listeners too, here on Discord, on YouTube. If you can do something, just hit us up and get involved. I mean, if you're interested into Unreal Engine, this is an awesome technology. We can use that. We can do 3D models and show them in an really nice graphical environment. That could be something. That could be the library, the digital library you were speaking of. It could be something that's combined with Unreal Engine, with the map we are building. So yeah, absolutely, 100%
I think
agree.
at that point it's prevalent to say that with our website that we've got, well, now working thanks to Guy, like a library of over 300,000 documents, papers, everything ready to rumble on archaeoacoustics, all the hallmarks, everything that you could imagine. And it's taken a long time to get it sorted. So I'd like to thank Geek and Mary, his wife, for all their coding and hard work to get the library sorted within the institute. With that in mind, with the digital Alexandria, which is a big dream of mine as well, when all the information is collated together, we'd almost have not just a global map with the hallmarks and the sites and everything that we discuss and videos and so on. We could also link the library, so we've got papers and different opinions, and then everybody that's looking at that site is getting an overview and a link to absolutely every bit of information that they could possibly want, from alternative to mainstream to an overview, a library, a digital view, a walk around, a video from this person, that. I think we'd be hitting it so big that no one else would have that access. So it's not only just a digital library, but it's an actual library that's got books attached to it, papers attached to it. So then it's down to the individual user to make their own opinion on all the information, not just somebody's opinion. Do you get what I mean? This would be an overview of it, the site in its entirety. I think that would be my dream.
Absolutely, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
That that and a catamaran to go to the Mediterranean.
yeah.
Yeah, as soon as possible. Yeah.
Okay,
Guys, should we
guys.
leave it
All right.
there? And
Cool.
thank you.
Yes,
Thank you to the
Yeah.
lads
absolutely.
and ladies in the audience, if there is
Thank
any
you,
ladies.
guys.
Thank you for watching, guys, and listening. So I do appreciate that.
Sure.
Cheers.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Yes.